Hello and welcome back to the Oregon Makers channel. Today we are building part one of 3 items for Adirondack chairs for the backyard. This is the classic kind of Norm Abram New Yankee Workshop plans, but I'm redoing it because he's using Mahogany and Cypress in his original build, and I'm using Western Red Cedar, so I'm kind of beefing it up a little bit. Just breaking down all the stock here, give you an idea of my process with the planer, the table saw. Up next will be the joiner. Just kind of dimensioning stuff down to reasonable sizes. So having to calculate different thicknesses, and then also trying to make it look a little more fine furniture than rustic backyard furniture. So just taking the saw marks off the longer pieces here, and cutting, batch cutting stuff down to size. This is my old school method of doing it. I don't need a sliding ruler or anything on my table. I have a piece of plywood that I use 2 spring clamps and can do multiple cuts. Just super simple. The saw stand I have is because I used to do a fair amount of millwork, and it's nice that I can move the saw from room to room whenever I'm doing the millwork in house, and it lives happily against the garage wall. Getting all the pieces cut. Now let's build the table. This is my favorite little layout gauge. I will probably do a little video on it. I'm just marking where my screw holes are going to be. I want them all to be kind of consistent in the center of the board. And yeah, here's a little close-up of that. A little rare earth magnet, brass, a nice ruler, and a little slider. So I can just adjust it and do all my marking. I use it to set router bits and a lot of stuff. I love that too. I like to have my screws going straight. So got my countersink bit in the drill press and just drilling where I had marked earlier. And then I'm going to plug all this, so with some offcuts from other parts of this project. I'm just cutting plugs. The key here is to go slow. It will burn really easily. And I typically cut about 9 or 10 plugs at a time, and then I just let the bit cool off. You can really smoke this bit fairly easily. So, as Norm would say, time for some assembly. Glue on my finger seems to work best in this kind of scenario. And I just have the little 90-degree blocks there to kind of make sure I'm close. And driving screws in. More glue, lying, and driving home. I set the torque on this gun to just kind of set the screw into the countersink part. I don't want to really force it in there too much, so like the torque setting on this little Bosch guy is probably set at like 6 or 7. So I've drilled off camera the countersinks here, and just lining everything up to set up for an arc that I'm going to be putting on the end here. So starting in the center, and then I'll have a little spacer strip. I'll just work my way out to the edge here. And these center 3 are pretty straightforward because they're just the screws right down the middle of the board. The layout on the edges requires a little thinking because I don't want to miss the apron. I'm going to add one more screw in the center because people typically are going to pick this table up from the edges, and so I just want to have one more screw in there. So I'm kind of laying out where the legs are and where the apron is, and finding my center line and matching my screw lines up so everything looks good when it's all done. even though all these are going to be plugged, you know, you're still going to see the plugs. The great thing about cedar is that it ages really well, and any inconsistency in the color of the cedar, once it starts to gray out, it all goes gray, so the plugs really do disappear after about a year. Just kind of matching my dimensions from both sides. I go nuts on the layout if you haven't figured that out yet. So off camera, drill those on the drill press, and now time to put in the screws. I'm just putting the ones on the end for now because we're going to take this all apart after we draw the arc and do some more machining to it. So finding the center line of the table, kind of my left to right. I cut it like an 1/8 inch heavy here on either side. Measuring down on each side, and then you can see me kind of flex the ruler there. I'm going to just use a spring clamp on either edge to hold my outer line, and I'm going to pull it to the line I made and just draw a nice little line. Flip it over, rinse, repeat the other side here. And this is a great trick. This is why I love metal rulers. The ruler I'm using here is a center finding ruler. Comes in handy a lot, especially because I'm dyslexic. Now just with the bandsaw, and I'm just kind of trimming the arc here on each board. My excellent bandsaw skills here. Almost cutting a straight line. Everything looks good. I untension the bandsaw. I'm really good habit of have a little light, a little LED light on the bandsaw. When the light's on, the blade is tensioned. That's how I always remember. So I've kind of lined these up just to smooth them out a little bit. Because the arc was done with some spacers, you can still, the arc is still there, but if you notice the side I'm not sanding is a little off. And now I'm readjusting that side. Spin it around, and then just kind of smooth out that edge. Now I'm going to round everything over on the router bit. If you always see me go into my phone, my vacuum is run off my telephone. So I have a little switch on the wall that my phone talks to, and the vacuum's plugged into that. So routing over just a quarter round all the top sides. And then I think on the edges I round over the bottom side as well. Just because that's where your hands are going to grab it when you pick it up and move it when you cut the grass. So, router table, real simple. It's an old Rockler thing, no router lift. Again, I use my little gauge that I made to set router heights. Camera batteries died when I was plugging these, so now you're watching me flush trim them off. I usually let the glue set kind of just to kind of scum over, and then when you flush trim, the glue kind of, and the sawdust kind of act as a filler. It works great. So now I'm putting the legs on. These are beefier than the original plans. I think these are like 5/4 final dimension. Plain down 2x material. Rounded over all the edges. Real important to round over the feet bottoms. So if somebody slides this on concrete, it won't splinter. Always works great. And then if I do finish these, typically I'll take like a little bucket of my finish and just soak each bottom of the leg in the bucket. That also absorbs, because the ingrain absorbs so much finish. But I don't know what we're going to do with these. Probably let them go gray. You know, with cedar, you oil it or you don't. They both will last you 25, 30 years. I'm just driving the screws in from the back on this because you're not going to see them. and I don't worry about plugging it or anything. Alright, now I'm going to use some construction adhesive. This works really good outdoor, I think way better than wood glue does. It just is kind of more flexible, and when the wood does move, because it's, you know, when it gets wet and stuff, the construction adhesive has, over time, just works so much better outdoor than glue does. So, same process, just putting everything back together now. All my holes are already kind of pre-drilled from when I did the first bit. Construction adhesive also can fix some, you know, minor flaws. So like if the legs and the apron aren't exactly in plane, the construction adhesive will kind of take up the little bit in between. I'm wearing gloves. They're terrible gloves. The whole COVID thing, and my glove supply, you know, ran out, and these are like what food service people use, and they're awful. But that's what I have. Because getting construction adhesive off your hands, not so much fun. It pretty much is one of those, they wear off, not the cool Elmer's glue peel off kind of scenario. Just stuck a screw back in the bottle of the construction adhesive because I'm done with it, and it's a good way to hold it. And this screw was all wacky. Couldn't get it to drive in straight, and yeah, they didn't do the square head in it very well. So now I'm cleaning up the construction adhesive because once it sets, it's really kind of a pain to get off. You can use acetone, but the 5-in-1 tool has a nice sharp edge on one end and it has a nice little kind of fillet on the other, and so I use the rounded edge, and it makes like a really nice bead on the bottom. Now time for some plugs. And basically I just kind of draw a circle with the glue bottle and make sure the glue is running down all the sides of the hole, and tapping them in. Another favorite sped up YouTube sound is a hammer. And then those are the other screws down the middle, just to give it some extra mechanical strength there. And that plug just didn't want to fit in there, so I'm just kind of sanding it, giving it a little bit of a bevel. And then drive it in. More of the same. And getting close to finishing. Just kind of wiping up the excess glue that's kind of squeezed out. I like to leave a little bit of the glue around. Like I said, it's once I trim it, it kind of works as a filler. Although the plug cutter I have and the countersink bit I have are a matched set, so they're exactly the same. It's the cedar plugs kind of get a little funny. And then what I do when I hammer it in, I'm actually crushing the fibers a little bit. And kind of getting it to mushroom right there on the top, and that makes it kind of hold in there a little bit better. And then before I do a final sanding, I'll let this cure, so like overnight or at least a couple hours. You can kind of see the glue kind of streaks out there a little bit. And there's the table on our new backdrop. And that's how we made it.